So, Michael Schwarz, you're the author, together with Joost Elfers, of a book called Sustainism is the New Modernism. And in this book, you point out some of the conditions and components of a possible future which you describe as sustainist. Now, I'd never heard that word before. Why did you have to come up with a completely new word?
Well, actually, Joost Elfers, who's a designer who lives in New York already 40 years nearly, who's also from Holland, we were talking about how culture is really changing and how sustainability, but also other aspects like connectivity and a new sense of a local and a global world were really fundamentally shifting not our life, only our life world, but also really our culture. And then when we start thinking that it's actually comparable to modernism in the 20th century, which started as a cultural style in architecture and design, but then a modernistic way of living, then basically took 50, 75 years to color everything in our lives, from our cities to our food to our business practices or our sense of time. So then we thought we need some kind of ism. It's not post-modernism or post-postmodern. We need a new word. And we talked about it for a bit. And because so much of this new paradigm and this new cultural era, as we call it, is based on certain values and attitudes that are very close to the sustainability movement. We've got sort of close to this sustainable thing. And then we said, well, then actually we should call it Sustainism, but surely the culture of sustainability, if that's Sustainism, then other people have used this as well. So I started to Google the word. I thought, well, I'd like to use the word and see who else has used it. I'm sure it exists. It's so obvious. And to our great surprise, no one had used the word. And that was quite sort of shocking, but also very exciting. So we coined that phrase that the next era after modernism is Sustainism. And I mean, you can see there that words are very powerful to make people aware that there's something fundamentally changed.
So in your book, you've also come up with a new symbol, or several new symbols, but the most important of them is this trefoil. Maybe you could explain why you chose that symbol and what it symbolizes.
Okay, well, first as a sort of prologue a bit, that Joost Elfers, again, he's not just a book publisher, but also a designer. Once we had focused on the cultural dimensions of these changes that are happening, and in that sense, the book, which is called, as you quoted, Sustainism is the New Modernism, maybe the subtitle is maybe more significant, a cultural manifesto for the Sustainist era. And I underline this word culture. We thought if you start thinking about a new culture, culture also has new language, that's a word, but also new symbols and other values and lots of things and rituals that come with culture. So particularly Joost Elfers thought it was very important in the manifesto to make it a visual manifesto where we provocatively introduce new symbols that highlight or magnify or symbolize, of course, literally, some of the elements of this new culture. And the trefoil, which is a three-dimensional knot, it's actually the simplest knot you can actually make a single knot and put the ends together, symbolizes a world that from now on, everything is interconnected and interdependent. From now on, the world is all about relationships. And when I say interconnected, it both is on a conceptual level, that we cannot talk about the food problem in the world without talking about the health problem or about even media. They're all connected. We cannot talk about culture without talking about technology, all kinds of things that and the other way around, that we could do in the past, but also interconnected that in a global world, we cannot talk about globalization without talking about the local. And also we experience that we cannot nowadays live in the local without being all the time connected to the local. So this trefoil knot was for us a symbol that we, I mean, you could also say it's a systems way of looking, that's been around for a long time, but that we really have to think in terms of connectedness, relationships, interdependencies in a really fundamental way at the heart of everything we do, instead of saying we have like interdisciplinary approaches that they have all these different disciplines and then you try to connect them. No, you have to start almost from the connectedness. And this is what we try to symbolize with this knot.
Yeah. So if you were to compare what you call Sustainism with, I don't know, plain old ecological politics, is there anything new here? Are you introducing anything that you don't find in the mainstream as you see it?
I think there's two things. One is that, and this is something that the environmental movement sometimes finds quite difficult to integrate, is that Sustainism is a cultural shift. It's a cultural paradigm. And the idea that the ecological movement and our ecological to move towards sustainable development, that's a deeply cultural challenge, is sort of new, although it's very obvious when you start to talk about lifestyles. But the main thrust of ecological politics has been actually about the physical environment, about technological and non-technological tools that you can then measure that the impact of the environment is minimized. So it is like a technical, physical, economic, and in the end, social challenge. But it's not seen as a cultural shift. So in that sense, it already puts the foundation under the ecological politics. And the second thing, what I think we add, is that Sustainism is much more than green. Sustainism is also, at the same time, the world of connectedness, the world of new localism, the world of sharing, which is a very good indicator. There's a whole sharing culture and sharing economy coming up in quite a big way as a new value in the way we live. Those things are becoming integrated in what I would say sustainist rather than sustainable politics or a sustainist lifestyle, and not just ecological, and they're becoming more and more integrated. So in that sense, sustainist is also a way. I mean, you could also say sustainability always had a social component. So social and ecological sustainability together is sustainist. That's fine with me as well. But we have to break out of the idea that to make the world more sustainable, that it's somewhere a sort of technical question that has a technical fix. We have to shift the debate to something that it's a social cultural shift, and only then we can truly be sustainable both socially and ecologically.
So apart from the trefoil, you have a symbol for local. Could you talk about that symbol?
Yeah, the symbol for the local is very close to our heart, because we found that we are in the sustainist times, in a time where the local is no longer the opposite of the global. There was, before globalization, you had local and it became more national and it became bigger and it became global. And then people started to go back to the local, thinking that would be the antidote to the global. Now we know with our iPhones in our pockets and our 24/7 connectedness to the world, that we are in many parts of the world, we are both local and global. So we have local existences that are at the same time global. And when we connect globally, we also know that we're not just locally rooted, that there are a lot of local qualities that we really value. So we have to find new forms of localism that are not provincial, which is not like just your town. Because it's your town, it's local. Because your town, of course, has also become global.
One thought that I had when I read your book was that it seems that we need some new words. And one characteristic of the words that we need is we need words that can contain the the paradoxes that we need to connect. So, in a way, we are individualistic, but on the other hand, we're also becoming more shared and common and interdependent. And in a way, we're becoming more specialized, but at the same time, we need general systemic knowledge. You mentioned this that we need to be local and global. And to me, it seems that a lot of these sort of strange, paradoxical, hybrid, complex constructions all have this in common, that they combine features that we used to put in very different categories, but now we discover that we have to have both, and we don't have words to describe it without seemingly talking about a paradox.
No, I absolutely agree. I think Sustainism is very much about these, and the difficulty is it's new, and we like ecological and high tech used to be contradictory. Local and global used to be contradictory. As you say, individual brilliance and creativity and the lone scientist or the lone artist is the opposite of sort of a team effort or commons. And now more and more we're finding out there is sort of a middle ground which may become the ground, but we don't have words for it other than saying it connects the two extremes, and then it looks like paradoxes. So this is typical of a transition period, going from one era to another, from one paradigm to another, from one culture to another. So you're absolutely right. That's what we're struggling with, and since we exchange our ideas through words, it's very hard because we don't have the words.
It struck me this book. You don't really complain about much, and there's not a lot of there's not a lot of problems that you point out. You point out conditions or components of a future, but you don't really complain. Is that on purpose?
It is on purpose, because I think what we try to emphasize that this is a new outlook. This is a new way of looking, where suddenly, instead of thinking about everything in answer to the problems, we focus on the qualities in our life or in the world that we actually, I think many of us would like to strive for. So it becomes a positive thing. And of course, it would be fair to say that given the real ecological problems, or the real problems of inequality, or the real problems of the economy, which are immense, this manifesto is naively optimistic by not even talking about those. But this is deliberate to shift. A good example is to shift the way we think about these things. If you think of some of the answers from the environmental movement, for example, we have to recycle and we may have to use less materials, but it's always like less, and we focus on what we shouldn't do anymore. And maybe if we think of the future, we should look at what we not only should do, but what we'd like to do. And I think if you look at the history of culture, the history of cultural change has often been driven by things that people were drawn towards rather than against. So this is a deliberate tone we have. But although it may be naively optimistic, I don't think it's unrealistic either.
Okay, thank you very much, Michiel Schwarz, for expanding on your new book, Sustainism is the New Modernism.
Thanks, pleasure.